I'm John. Welcome once again to my true crime podcast entitled Finding My Brother's Killer. At this point, we should probably talk a bit about my brother and who he was and how he got to be where he was. My brother died when he was 38. He was he was adopted into our family from El Salvador at about the age of 1.5 or 2. So he looked Hispanic. I mean, you can look at the picture associated with this podcast and see who or what he was. Now, that may eventually have been a problem or a thing that he had to deal with as he, when he died, was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a sanctuary city that's, 200 miles from the border. So, in talking with him, he told me that he was frequently treated like a Mexican, which I'm not sure what that meant. Now, my brother at the time was living in a one-bedroom studio apartment as a single individual. However, he had 3 roommates living with him, sort of off the books. Those roommates were a Brian Thompson, who was about 50 at the time, an Avery Cheeks, another individual, and the third individual was a female named Desiree Pacheco. If you're going to start taking notes and want to play along with this mystery, now would be a time to go and grab a pad of paper. Anyway, so my brother had 3 roommates off record during the winter, and this was in part because of COVID. He died in 2021 in the winter, and so that was sort of at the tail end of the high period of COVID. What else can I tell you? He now 7 years ago I had kidney stones and had to get them operated on up in Albuquerque. And so that required us to go and stay with him overnight. We parked in his driveway. He lived outside of Albuquerque at the time. And he was nervous about us coming to visit him because at that time he was smoking a lot of marijuana. And he was worried about how I would react and or handle that, and if I would let that get back to our parents and all this kind of crap. So the solution sort of was, when I got up there, that he and I found ourselves out in his garage smoking a little marijuana. Now, that had 2 effects. One, it did not alleviate my kidney stone pain at all. In fact, it exacerbated it. So if you have kidney stones and you think smoking weed is going to help with the pain, forget about it. In some respects, it only makes it worse. But at the same time, that sort of broke the ice with my brother and I and allowed us to explore and discuss in more his drug use and his drug history. And so he was pretty honest and open with me about what he was doing and when he was doing and how often he was doing it. And what that translates into is basically he just smoked marijuana and sometimes would sprinkle some cocaine on the top of it. And when I was in college, they called that doing a white cap. And what that does is that has the effect of getting you stoned because you smoked marijuana. And normally, if that's all you did, I guess you'd be tired. But the cocaine is a stimulant, which gets you up, so you're not tired anymore. So he would do those. Although he didn't do that when I was there staying with him. He told me that's what he did. Anyway, so a year before he died, my brother, who had also a big drinking problem, apparently threw a lawn chair or something off the 3rd-story balcony of his apartment building, and it landed within 6 feet of an individual downstairs. Because of the proximity of the chair impacting the ground to this individual, the police automatically chalked that up as an attempted murder. And so he was looking at some pretty serious court interaction. And so he was going through the court process and was striking some sort of deal with the probation department and the district attorney and things like that. We can get all into this later. But long story short, when May of 2021 rolled around, my brother was no longer drinking and no longer doing drugs. And so, let's see, what else can I tell you? I spoke to my brother frequently, actually. My mom talked to him every day, and I would talk to my brother maybe once or twice a month. We would chat on the internet. He was a cook, and I had spent one summer as a cook, and so we'd periodically swap recipes and stuff like that, cooking ideas. I chatted with my brother no less or no more than 48 hours before he died. And his plan at that time, he conveyed this to both me and my mother. His plan at the time was to tell his roommates that at the end of the year, he was shutting it down and he was going to be off parole successfully, and he was going to move out of the apartment and move back to North Carolina to be closer to my parents. And in that spring, he and my parents were going to go on a trip to Rome. So he was looking forward to that, and they were looking forward to that. And he had told me that was the plan. And I had no reason to see or think that that wasn't going to be the case. Anyway, so on December 21st at 2 a.m. local time, Albuquerque here, the phone rang at my parents' house in North Carolina at 4 a.m. their time. My mom answered the phone. The homeless person who was calling my parents said simply, "Now that he's dead, can we have all of his things?" And my mom didn't really understand what she was talking about and pressed for a little more information and then hung up the phone. After which time, again, my mom in North Carolina called me at 11 minutes after 2 and said simply, "He's dead." I said, "I don't understand. What are you talking about?" She said, Yali's dead." And we spoke for another minute or two after that, and then hung up the phone. Now, this is important. Make that note that my mom was in North Carolina, just outside of Fayetteville. And I say this because 2 hours earlier, the police officer who wrote up the report about my brother's death will report discussing Yali's death with my mother out in the parking lot downstairs at the apartment complex. So we'll leave it there and proceed on to the next episode when you hit the button. We'll talk to you in a minute.